Fabulous. Just cool. So how are you, John?
Hello, well, Alex, and yourself?
Excellent. Yeah, great. Nice to see you. I don't know about you, but I'm really enjoying our Tuesday virtual dates, where we get to talk about all things future related, with the trends and little bits of innovation that seems to enter your world, and we get a chance to crawl around your brain a bit and take a look at what the world looks like or what it will be looking like, right? So that's
Gary.
what we do here. Yeah, scary. The future in mind. So today, the story I'm looking at is kind of looking at the future of the consumer, why solo dining is becoming more and more popular. So most restaurants, I'm just paraphrasing what you put here, most restaurants are set up for groups or couples eating together. But a recent article by Colin Nagy points out that the number of people intentionally choosing to eat out alone is on the rise. Do you want to give us some background? Why is this happening, and why is it noteworthy?
Yeah, so exactly on that point, most restaurants, I suppose, in Western areas are set up for groups. So either very large tables or a table for two. It's very rare that you would go to a restaurant alone, as opposed to the East. I, I don't know if I've told you, but I spent a number of years traveling to Taiwan. And what always
Oh,
struck
cool.
me in Taiwan is that it was very acceptable for people just to stop in at a restaurant and enjoy something to eat alone. That was normal practice there because I think the city itself, Taipei, is set up as a commuter city. So a lot of people finish work at 6 o'clock and then they just seem to grab a bite to eat before they grab the MRT to, take the trip home. As opposed to other places around the world, when you go to a restaurant and you just so happen to ask for a table for one, a lot of the times, like the waiter or the maitre d' would probably frown at you and wonder what's wrong with you, like why are you eating alone? So based on that, I found it quite interesting that the number of people who are intentionally choosing to go and eat out alone, especially in places like New York City, is increasing. So there's a recorded fact that more and more people are choosing to go and eat alone. And that's not because they're necessarily lonely. They might have a family at home, but they're actually just choosing a little bit of quality time to themselves. And it's not like they're going to a McDonald's and enjoying like a quick burger. They're actually going to a proper restaurant and enjoying really
Yes.
amazing food, but alone. So this, if you are a restaurateur or someone who's in hospitality, it actually presents like quite an interesting opportunity because the fact that everyone is kind of set up for these kind of dining experiences that can capture an alone dining experience and kind of make it a welcoming and memorable experience for solo diners, I think would be able to position themselves quite favorably in the marketplace. And the story that I posted, I found quite intriguing because there's a restaurant group in America where if you are dining alone, you get a free glass of wine on the house as a solo diner.
Wow.
So it's just like a little incentive just to make you feel a little bit more welcome. But yeah, I suppose, there's so many news stories about the epidemic of loneliness and people struggling with mental health. According to psychologists, dining alone can actually be quite beneficial to your mental health because you're choosing to spend quality time with yourself. So you're developing the relationship with yourself. So yeah, I find this an interesting trend. It's something which I think presents itself as a strategic opportunity for the hospitality industry.
So it's such a different, noteworthy kind of concept, isn't it? Because dining is always like, for thousands of years we've all dined as a group, all kind of gathering around the flame, around the fire, around the campfire. It's very kind of hunter gatherer, isn't it? And so now to kind of turn away and to kind of do that alone, as an individual experience, is very much kind of against the grain. But at the same time, it also feels very natural in our everyday kind of lives, in our little microcosm, because, after a long day of working, 9, 10, 11 hours, my wife and I, we're very comfortable, especially after we put the kids to bed, to just kind of be alone and sort of take my bowl of pasta or something with me and then watch my own, Netflix and chill. Like, because the kind of I know I'm bringing, entertainment into it, but the kind of the need to also have to now accommodate somebody else and, be in conversation, ask questions when maybe I just don't feel like it, is something that I'm now just going to find another solution for. Do you think it's because we're just, are we dining alone because we just want to have more alone time to kind of disconnect and to almost distract ourselves? Or what else do you think is at the root of this?
I don't know. I think that, it might not even be as deep and philosophical as that. It might just be that actually, it's a good excuse just to kind of plug out, maybe, as you say, plug out and actually just enjoy your own company for a minute. I think part of our jobs is that we give so much to other people in our work. I know myself, I'm in meetings, online meetings, yes. And I mean, it's always good to kind of connect with your family, and you're doing that the majority of the time. But even in my own situation, my wife has actually put a little time in my diary, which is once a week, which is sort of quality time with John. And and she kind of encourages me to go and do my own thing and just go and enjoy something out of the ordinary. And often I've actually gone to the local sushi place around here. And what's cool about that place is that they have a bar. So if you're going to go and enjoy something, you can sit at the bar and do it there. And I think it's just a nice time to actually get off your phone, maybe take a book, spend some time actually really focusing on what it is that you're eating. Maybe you're enjoying a nice glass of wine. It's an opportunity to kind of self-indulge. And I think the new term for it is self-care. You're not necessarily worrying about, as you say, the needs of somebody else. You just focus on your own needs, on your own self-care. And be that a run in the mountain or like an amazing bowl of pasta by yourself, I think it ticks that box. And I think we're starting to realize that this self-care is actually quite important, because, I suppose in years gone by, that would have been seen as selfish. But hey, if you're not looking after yourself, who the hell is? So if you want to be a nice person, look after yourself first, and then you can look after other people. So I think it is a form of recharging. It's a form of reconnecting with yourself, which I think now, because there's such a lot of focus on mental health, it's becoming more and more acceptable. I think in the past, there would have been a certain level of shame that would be attached to going to eating alone in a restaurant. But that narrative is changing. And I think it's a good thing.
I would agree. It's interesting to see how these sorts of things are, because it's also culturally, especially in the West and Western type of countries, that kind of thing is seen as a natural next step, because many people just do that anyway. But perhaps, let's say in Southeast Asia, where, you have more traditional kinds of approaches to eating, to sharing meals together, for families dining together. In some places, maybe in more rural places, it might be the only meal they have together. You do it together because it's so. Do you think that this kind of thing is I'm going to ask you, my inner sort of Marxist is kind of wanting to kind of, check in here. Like, is this because we're in a sort of a position of privilege that we're able to kind of take The Crown season 6 and my bowl of pasta, and kind of just do it on my own, or I can take myself down to a sushi restaurant because I can, and that's a privilege? How should we think about it if it is that?
It's 100% a privilege, because I think it's a total luxury indulgence. If you can go to a great restaurant, which, again, we're not talking about McDonald's, we're talking about a 5-star celebrity chef restaurant, and you can take yourself and comfortably sit there and enjoy your meal. And as you say, like read a good book or do whatever you want to do, you know, look around or just sort of ponder life from your own perspective. That's a total luxury. It's a total self-indulgence. It's the same, I suppose, as going and having a massage or a facial or, you know, a manicure or something like that. Just, you know, something for Alex. Because you deserve it. You know, I can kind of feel the advertising payoff line right now. But yeah, I think it is an indulgence. It is total luxury. And I think it's also about how you frame it. And again, it's not like you're going to do it every single night.
Right.
It's still, you have a family, you have friends, you have a network, and should you choose so, you can also go and have an amazing sort of night out and meal out with your you know, significant others.
Yeah.
But there is also the alternative option of going and just enjoying your own company.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think it's totally normal. It's totally natural. And I think in big cities where people are professionals and, you know, they're spending time commuting alone.
Yes.
So why part of your commute would you not include dinner and a train ride?
Yeah, that's true. And giving yourself a break. Yeah, maybe there is an element of privilege to that, but if you can, and you know, and you need one, which I'm sure we all do, then, you know, like David Croner has just said on LinkedIn, listening to us, he said, you know, it's good for your neural networks. You know, you're giving yourself a break, while also just for a moment turning the attention back to, okay, let's just check in. What do I need? Can I be mindful about this experience? Maybe that's the kind of the defining factor here, is that you're doing it mindfully. And that it's better to be able to kind of go, you know what, I deserve this. This is great. I'm about to have this delicious bowl of food, or, you know, California roll in front of me, if your name is John, and you're going to do it intentionally rather than maybe what I'm doing, which is the bad way, which is to just wolf something down while I'm watching Netflix of a show I don't even care about. So once again, it's this back and forth, isn't it? But it's interesting to see how the fact that restaurants are aware of this and they're wanting to cater for that as a public experience, but also private.
Well, increasingly so. I think there's a huge stigma around it. So we're at the early stages, and that's why obviously I'm writing about it, because it's something which, you know, is emerging. It's a new form of consumer behavior which is coming out. Yeah, maybe in 10 years' time, it'll be totally normal for everyone to have date night out alone. And you know, exactly on that point, you intentionally going and spending time alone, reconnecting with yourself, trying to like have a positive conversation with your own, you know, where am I at? What do I want? And just to make that connection. As yet, I don't think it's mainstream. But yeah, 10 years time, it could totally be the norm, and your doctor will probably be prescribing it.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy to think about it like that, as a prescription, as a sort of a treatment for how to, because it obviously it makes sense. You know, I think we're all living in an age where we don't put back enough into our own tank. And so by the time date night comes around, or when I need to go and, you know, put myself out there, or if there's a birthday party, or if I'm meeting people or whatever it is, then like I'm probably more and more just not going to want to do that, because I'm just seeking other ways to skip so that I can bomb on not going out, because I just want time for myself. And so maybe if we intentionally did that more often, we'd be able to be, you know, sort of more publicly available. Yeah.
Right. And I think sometimes friends and your friends and groups of people can also be a distraction. So when you intentionally put time in your diary to spend moments with yourself, I think that's pretty mature. And I'm thinking now, even 10 years ago, I guess the idea of doing a yoga class, not just for the exercise, but for the meditative mindfulness experience of doing yoga would not have been as sort of pervasive as what it is today.
True.
So I think, again, this is one of those things which is the same as spending time alone exercising, there are huge mental health benefits to that.
Yeah.
And I think in addition to that, these kind of activities would be the same thing.
So switching gears then from supper to supermarkets, there was another story that caught your eye this week about a French supermarket that stood up for their shoppers, breaking with tradition. A large supermarket group starts a fight for their customers instead of with, which I think maybe has been the order of the day up until now. And this is with this has taken place with Carrefour, which is a huge European supermarket brand. Give us the background there. What happened? Why is it an issue?
Okay, so there are a few things that are converging here. The one is that supermarkets and supermarket brands around the world, I think, are pretty much a commodity. And supermarket brands, they tend to struggle to differentiate themselves from other supermarkets. So a lot of them will have a loyalty program, or they might have online deliveries or whatever it might be. But it's a tough ask to try and differentiate one brand from another.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity there to do something a little bit different. The other significant change, which has been happening for a while now, and it's something which absolutely infuriates consumers, is the fact that manufacturers, in order to try and make sure that they keep the demand for their products pretty stable, as inflation creeps into the value chain, they tend to shrink the size of the products that they market in the marketplace. So you go and there was a chocolate bar that used to be 120 grams last week. You come back this week and it's down to 100 grams. So that 20 grams disappears, but you pay the same price for the chocolate bar.
Shrinkflation, right? Yeah.
Shrinkflation is what they call it. There's another term which I learned just last week, also called skimpflation, where the chocolate bar might have been made with real cocoa and real sugar last week. This week it's made with cornstarch and some kind of artificial flavorant that acts the same way as the original ingredients, but they're a lot cheaper in order to make the bar. So this is a tactic and a trick by manufacturers to try and make their sales curves nice and stable. Now, we all know that this is happening, but what happened recently is that Carrefour, the big French supermarket group, actually started naming and shaming the manufacturers and brands that were practicing shrinkflation. So if you went and bought a packet of Lay's chips, there'd be a little shelf talker in red at the location of the chips, which would say, shoppers beware, this product, the net weight is actually less than what it was a month ago. And what they were trying to do is actually bring pressure on the manufacturers to not do that. And I suppose strategically, a lot of people are saying, well, that's just absolute madness. Like, why would you go to war with your suppliers and like these well-known brands in a marketplace where everyone is wanting to kind of secure great relationships with their supply chain? But on the other side of it, if you are the biggest supermarket group in France, who holds the power there? It's absolutely the retailer. And I think what the retailer is doing in this case is that they're building up a level of trust with the consumer. And ultimately, it's the customer who pays the bills. Your supply chain are just there to put their products on the shelves. They're going to win out of the exposure that they have at the supermarket. So if they're committing fraud, which is essentially what this is, surely you should be protecting your customers against blatant fraud, because it's not like there's full disclosure. It's not like the manufacturers are saying, listen, please be aware, we're actually shrinking the size of our product. They're carrying on as if it's normal. So yes, technically that is fraud. I'm sure they couldn't be taken to court and prosecuted for it, but it's not ethical. And I think in many ways, customers, people, shoppers are so irritated by this practice everywhere in the world. So it just blows my mind that it carries on. Why is it such a standard practice? I don't understand it. My only explanation is that the downside risk of putting prices up is going to affect everyone far worse than this fraud. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I completely agree with the outlook of this being, something that ultimately benefits the customer. Of course, if I'm paying $2 or $3 for a kind of a glass of Nescafe, as you've got on your article there, and over time I pay the same amount, but the net weight reduces, without anyone asking me or anyone kind of checking if that's okay with the customer, who should be at the center here. I agree that, that's definitely something you can argue is fraud. But is this not Carrefour just sort of having a great moment in the sun and kind of posturing, making themselves look good for the cameras? Because they win either way, right? Because they can kind of say, well, it's their fault. It's blame the supply chain, not us. Because look, we're doing something about it. We're standing up for you, the customer. How much of this is theater and how much of this is actually something that we can expect to really change?
Well, it's 100% marketing. So what's the job of a business? The job of a business is to acquire and keep a customer. That's your only job. So that means that the most important functions within any business are marketing and innovation. That's it. Everything else is superfluous. And I didn't say that. Peter Drucker said that. So I agree with him. It's marketing, which includes sales and innovation. So unless you're bringing on board new products and unless you're keeping and delighting your customers, you don't have a business. So this is posturing, but it's also great marketing. And great marketing is, what moves should I pull in order to keep and delight my customers? And they've seen a glaring opportunity here and they're going for it. What's the long-term consequence of this kind of action? Well, they're going to, pull their weight with suppliers. Maybe the suppliers will blink and decide not to carry on their own strategic path of doing this. Maybe they will be far more transparent as to these kind of tactics that they employ. Maybe they'll extend the range then and say, listen, here's the reduced cost or reduced weight items, but you can also have the original at an elevated price. Maybe they just need to be more transparent as to how they do it.
Well, exactly, because Brad has just commented now while we're talking, and he said, interestingly, consumers are more likely to notice the increase in price rather than the amount of the product that's lost when packages shrink or when the net weight of something comes down, which is an interesting way to see it, right? Because ultimately, in both cases, you're losing value, but it's about how much of that is noticed or felt by the customer.
But the thing is, when the customer does notice, the emotional reaction that many, many customers have is this feeling of feeling ripped off. And I think that's the real worry here, is that, yes, inflation is a terrible thing in modern society, and understandably prices go up, and what you can buy for the money you have shrinks. But isn't that better? Because then you feel like, well, the enemy is something which is not necessarily the brand. It's not the supermarket. It's the government or it's the state. Look at this inflation. It's the economy. These things are terrible. But what the manufacturers and the brands are then doing is, by committing this fraud, they're actually making themselves the enemy. I don't know, that's the argument in my mind. I would rather be angry with inflation, which is something out there, as opposed to bringing that anger right to the doorstep of my brand. I wouldn't do that. I would go on a campaign saying, as a manufacturer, we'll do everything that we can to keep prices down. But at the end of the day, we want to deliver the same value that you've always expected as one of our customers. I don't know. I think it's a little bit short-sighted. I can see what they're doing, but I always get so angry when accountants and lawyers get involved in marketing. They have no place in marketing. Let it be said. So I just think that this is one of those cases where people are increasingly becoming angry, and because of that, switching brands. So potentially Carrefour could now bring in their own brands into the mix. So they could replace those well-known consumer brands with their own alternatives, which is maybe what they're wanting to do, just reducing the amount of shelf
So
space that they give these
so
brands.
so on that, just kind of casting the net a bit wider for a moment, if we look into the future of where, let's take a massive retailer like Carrefour. They have a huge presence all over Europe. I'm not sure if they're outside of Europe, but they're everywhere. Where I live in Spain, there's 7 of them in the space of sort of 20 kilometers. So they really are everywhere. Do you think that in the future there's a different way for them to secure market share, by kind of having this sort of consumer led, almost crusade, if you will? Because at the same time, there's also another big brand retailer in Spain called El Corte Inglés. I'm not sure if you heard of them. They're kind of like the Foschini, or the kind of the H&M, if you will, or maybe a little bit higher up. Anyway, a massive kind of mostly clothing and kind of homeware retailer. And they've been losing hundreds of millions of euros for at least a decade already now. So, you're kind of having, on the one side, vulnerability in the supply chain from suppliers and these guys who aren't playing ball because they're not delivering good products for you to put on your shelves. On the other side, you're competing against the kind of the big digital and e-commerce beast as well. Something like Amazon is robbing your sales left, right, and center. Is there a way forward for these kind of big established retailers in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think what this particular story highlights is the importance of relationships between retailers and the brands that they sell. Because I do feel that this tactic is very public, and it's a public shaming. And surely if the relationship between Carrefour and their suppliers was a good one, you'd pick up the phone and say, hey, what are you doing? I don't think this is a good tactic. Let's have a discussion. Maybe let's have a workshop or whatever it might be. So it feels like that relationship is not very healthy, if they had to resort to this kind of thing. Again, I'm kind of reminded of the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is kind of the leading research piece on where people's trust lies.
Yes.
And as we know, the trust that people have in key institutions of society, government, media, NGOs, and business, on all 4 accounts, it is decreasing remarkably. It's not news that people don't trust governments, or NGOs or the media. That's not news. The one institution which is kind of hanging on well is business. And people are looking towards business leaders and big brands to kind of protect them. And I think increasingly they will do business with brands that honor that trust and show that trust. And that's what's really key here. So even in South Africa, we've got a grocery supermarket brand that has been the leader in the category for many, many decades. But they didn't innovate. They failed to kind of bring in new technology innovations to do grocery deliveries. And they've lost massive amounts of market share. And it doesn't look likely that they will pick that up again. No matter what they now do, it's, this has to be a miracle for them to claw back that kind of market share. Because I think one of their competitors has built a great relationship with customers that kind of felt a little bit abandoned. Because they were so worrying about their market share and, how much money the directors were going to make. They took their eye off the ball. So I think this is what the opportunity is that you kind of have to show trust. You've got to build trust with the right kind of people. And if it takes this kind of, pretty audacious strategic move, then so be it. But I think that's what's key, is relationships and building the relationships with the right kind of people. So in the future, I absolutely think relationships are the most important thing. Technology obviously can strengthen those relationships, so they can make things far more efficient and easier. But people do business with people. They do business with brands that they have a relationship with. And that's what's key here.
Yeah, it's true. Oldie but a goldie. And as always, when we have these conversations on Tuesdays, it always seems to kind of, no matter what the story is, no matter what's going on, no matter how we're looking ahead, there's always that kind of returning back to these like kind of first principles, isn't it? You know, doing good business means, you know, having an empathy for customers, being straight with them, communicating clearly, staying relevant in their view. So it doesn't really matter whether, you know, this is talking about right now or in 20 years time. Those sorts of principles are always likely to stand and to be what people want, right? People want to be met with their needs today. And yeah, it's just so interesting how it always kind of, those cycles come back to these sort of simple principles. Just talk to consumers, give them what they want, be simple about it, be straightforward, and be honest, because that's what keeps those relationships. That's what develops those elements of trust.
Yeah, and especially during times of great uncertainty, like the times we are living in now, where there's a lot of inflation, there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. What people are really looking for is, who are our leaders? You know, who's got my back? Who's helping me out? And brands that can help people out and package great deals and just make life a little bit easier or a little bit less volatile. I think those are the brands that will, you know, understandably, those are the brands that are going to be popular and people want to do business with.
Do you think we're moving into an age where all brands are going to become lifestyle brands? Because in a sense, maybe you could argue that they are already, or the concept of a brand is something that is bigger than the product itself, right? It's this sort of persona. It's this thing that exists. It's this thing that hangs above an iPhone. It's not just an iPhone, but it's the Apple promise of quality, you know, that comes with it. It's the fact that it comes from Amazon. It's the fact that it comes from Google. Do you think that all brands, no matter if you're selling handguns or laundry detergent or whatever, they've got an interest in playing into that consumer imagination space, that kind of lifestyle space? Is that where we're headed, or has that already happened? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. You know, if I'm going to buy solar panels for my house, I don't really care about, you know, I don't really care about the little backstories or those kind of things that you would use in order to build a sort of luxury lifestyle brand or just a normal lifestyle brand. I don't think it necessarily applies. What I want when I buy solar panels is I want quality, you know, assurance of quality. Is there money back guarantee? What kind of warranty is there going to be on the product itself? What kind of technology was used? Is it going to be outdated within 5 years? All of those kind of things. So I want a checklist of assurances, as opposed to if I'm buying something from Louis Vuitton, or, you know, I'm buying a Rolex watch, or I'm shopping at H&M. I think in those instances, the perception of what the brand resembles is important, because ultimately with those brands, by supporting those brands, it says something about me. So what am I communicating about myself if I'm walking around with a Rolex watch? Kind of, you know, from the advertising I've seen, it kind of makes me feel a little bit like Roger Federer. So, you know, I'm a multi-millionaire. I'm at the top of my game. That's why I would buy a Rolex watch. When you say lifestyle brands, that's kind of where I'm going with that. I don't think that's not applicable for all brands. No.
I suppose the reason why I'm pursuing this is not so much maybe on the element of, you know, is every company going to have a brand? I suppose that's something that everyone is kind of aiming for. We're in the age of brands, these kind of lifelike brands, but rather are all brands going to play in the lifestyle space? Because, for example, there could be something, just using your solar panel company example, you could argue that, well, in order for me to get through to a customer like John, who's going to spend, let's say, $10,000 or whatever, putting, you know, a couple solar panels on his roof, or just one, you know, our brand needs to communicate reliability, it needs to communicate quality, it needs to. So is that just the same game that they're playing, or is it, because that's also a brand, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, maybe then what it is, it's not necessarily about a lifestyle brand, but I think the importance of building a brand for every single business in the future is going to be so much more important than even what it is today.
Right.
Because even if you chat to a hard-nosed capitalist like Warren Buffett buys brands because what he understands about brands is that there's a nice big moat around that business. And that moat also enables that business to sell their products at a premium. And that's what brands offer you. They offer you margin. They offer you a premium. They offer you customer predictability, because it's going to be far more difficult for a customer to walk away from a well-known brand than it is if it's not a well-crafted brand. So I think brands are one of those intangible things that unfortunately so many businesses don't understand, so many business leaders don't necessarily understand. They think a brand is something that's created by an ad agency or, you know, their cousin who's creative and can draw nicely. That's not what a brand is. A brand is how do you craft a very specific perception in the customer's mind, which accounts for value in their headspace. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's multifaceted. It takes a ton of work and a ton of money. But if you get it right, you've got a business that is a world beater. The challenge is getting through to people who run, you know, big confectionery brands and trying to explain to them that when you break trust, you take the Cadbury's brand and all of the money that's gone into building that brand and you bust it in half because now you've just broken the trust with people. Why would you do that? This brand is worth billions and billions of dollars. You're not going to go and put that at risk by just trying to save a few cents during times of inflation. So, yeah, I think maybe then the value and, you know, the respect for what a brand is, I think that's going to increase in the future for sure.
I can just hear Warren Buffett now saying, you know, in that crazy voice of his, I like to build brands, I like to buy brands, and in my portfolio, but totally. And I think a guy like him understands the power of brands. I suppose that's also reflected in, you know, the power of, or rather his own brand, if you like. You know, when people think about investing, they think Warren Buffett. You know, they think of these guys who are these sort of powerhouses because they've made those decisions. And very much, you know, he loves sticking to Coca-Cola, AT&T, Apple, Microsoft. You know, those things don't change because of the power of those brands, those well-known consumer kind of household names.
Very much so.
You know, and they've gotten it right, and that's why he gets it right. Yeah.
Right. And a brand like Apple, which I think is his biggest position, their focus is on marketing and innovation, which is what we said. You know, that's what they do well. They're masters at marketing and they are innovating all the time. They cannibalize their own product line. And that's what makes them so valuable.
Yes.
So there is nothing else. You just got to focus on those principles. And that's what makes companies massively valuable.
Yeah. Well, just like Brad has said now, Yeti is an example of a brand that's
great.
You know, which was
brand.
a product brand that has sort of successfully navigated that shift across to a lifestyle brand. And it's so true. You know, that's do you think that also the area we're in now, where we're talking about brands and the kind of that lifelike element of brands being, you know, for the first time, so personable, so kind of personalized, so kind of made for you, that feeling, that perception we get is you know, is because we're kind of in this digital age where before, I suppose it's obvious in a way, obviously you couldn't have those things that were done before because we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have, you know, personalized ads and so on. But do you think that there's something, is there anything in the era, let's say, of like Mad Men, 1950s, before you had this digital sort of age? Is there anything in the branding experience that maybe we've lost that we don't have anymore?
Well, you know, funny that you say personalization. I have a personal viewpoint that I think that branding is potentially on the wrong path. So the wrong path is exactly as you say, personalization. The problem is that when your brand experience is so bespoke to you, then there's no collective social capital which gives the brand then collective meaning.
Right. Right.
Now that I know how I've said that sounds hugely academic, but what I'm trying to say is that if you yourself are attaching value to a brand based on your personal interaction of it, then what value does the brand have? Because all brands have social value. If I have a Rolex, the watch itself is worth probably a fraction of what you pay for it, because what you're paying for the status of what that thing says about you.
Yes.
Now, if that experience is totally personal, then what your watch says about you will only have meaning to you. And then it has no value whatsoever because other people don't know what it is that you're wearing.
Yeah.
So that's why, as much as I think the tools are great, and I understand the narrative and I understand that it's a fantastic idea, I think potentially there is danger in just creating brands that are niched to one person's perspective. Not that that's necessarily an overwhelming concern right now, but I think it can be taken too far. So I think something that we seem to be so great at, and I think of a brand like Coca-Cola, is that Coca-Cola had like a strong national footprint. And when they went out with a campaign, it was like a global campaign and everyone got behind it. Now Coca-Cola's marketing is incredibly fragmented. Depending on where you are in the world or what language you speak, there'll be a different campaign running at any one time. And I think that might be something which, I don't know, I got a feeling that in years to come, we might look back at that strategy and go like, I don't know if that was such a good idea, because there was no unifying story about that brand. It ended up being quite fragmented.
At the same time, I suppose it's I suppose Coke execs listening to you will go, maybe that's true, but if the sales are still rocking, then does any of that actually matter? So is there a way to answer that?
Yeah, look, the sales are rocking because a brand like Coca-Cola has got so much brand equity that's built up over generations and decades of work. It's not going to disappear in a flash. It's a massive machine. It's not going to go away. But the problem with the machine is that there's no growth there. So, I don't know. The only way that Coca-Cola can go is down. It's just, It's the reality of it. So, because everyone knows it. So you can't go any further than what you are. So, the exciting spaces in these new brands that are creating new stories and new value propositions in the marketplace. And they don't have the budget to have all sorts of stories that are, bespoke for different regions. We spoke about Yeti. I think Yeti's got one marketing budget and they do one campaign a year and that's what you see. And Yeti is a great American brand that's very expensive for the cooler box that you buy. But yeah, I think they're doing very, very well because you're buying into that American outdoor lifestyle idea. I want one. I love the brand. So I think that's what I'm trying to get to, is that when everything becomes super personal, then what exactly are you selling? Then you're just selling like almost an echo in someone's head. I want to buy into something which is outside of me, right? Outside of where I live.
Food for thought. Maybe this is something we can think about more individually tonight when we're having our solo dinner date. John, yeah.
Listen, don't knock it. You got to try it.
Totally. Yeah. As always, super cool to talk to you. Really enjoying our sessions. And thanks for everyone else who was listening and hanging out and keeping the chat nice and active on LinkedIn. Thanks to Brad and David and Elodie. Appreciate your comments, being part of the conversation. If you're listening on Humble Mind as well, thanks for checking in. Make sure you check out John's blog at cherryflavor.com if you'd like to hear more or read more about his incisive view on things, and also our community learning platform called humblemind.com. We'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Alex. Have a good one.